You ever get blindsided so hard that for a second, you just stand there wondering if you're dreaming? That's what it felt like the day they fired me. My name's Caleb Miles. I'm 54 years old, and I live just outside Boone, North Carolina, on a little stretch of farmland my partner and I bought years ago. I've spent my whole adult life making violins, not just assembling them, not slapping glue on factory wood, but making them. Carving, shaping, listening. You don't just hear a violin. If it's done right, you feel it. For 20 years, I worked at Harmonia Instruments. Back when I started, it was a small place, run by people who cared about music more than profits. I still remember my first day, being handed a stack of spruce blanks and a simple instruction: make them sing. But companies change. People change. And one afternoon, sitting in a fluorescent-lit conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink, my time at Harmonia ended. Nicholas Rayburn was the one who broke the news. He was the new operations manager, all slick hair, pressed shirts, and a permanent look on his face like he smelled something bad. MBA type. I don't even think he could tell a Stradivarius from a shoebox. Caleb, Nicholas said, lacing his fingers together on the table. I want to start by saying how much we appreciate your years of service. I already knew. That sentence always ends with but. Unfortunately, with rising costs, we've had to make some hard decisions about staffing. After careful evaluation, he glanced at a folder like he needed confirmation. We've decided to eliminate your position. There it was. Just like that. 2 decades, gone in a 30-second speech he probably practiced in front of a mirror. I nodded once slow. I didn't trust myself to speak right away. My hands stayed flat on the table because if I clenched them, if I showed anything, they'd see it. They didn't deserve to see it. Nicholas kept talking, voice smooth like he was selling timeshares. Of course, we're offering a very generous severance package. 2 months' pay, full vacation payout, and a letter of recommendation. Generous. Sure. 2 months. After 20 years. From the corner of my eye, I saw Margaret from HR fidgeting with her pen. She couldn't look me in the face. Nicholas smiled that empty smile. We're moving toward a more scalable model. We can hire 3 assembly line workers for what we pay you. It's just economics, Caleb. It's not personal. Not personal. That was rich. I pushed my chair back slowly. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, but my hands stayed steady. Well, I said, voice low and even, I appreciate the honesty. Nicholas relaxed like he thought I was going to make it easy for him. He had no idea. I stood up, straightened my work apron out of habit even though I wouldn't need it again, and looked him dead in the eye. You'll find, I said quietly, that making a violin right isn't something you can teach in a week. You can't mass-produce soul. He blinked like he didn't know what to say, but I didn't wait around for a reply. I turned and walked out the door, down the familiar hall lined with photos of the master craftsmen who built Harmonia's name. Real men and women who knew what it meant to pour yourself into your work. My boots echoed on the tile floor as I headed to my bench one last time. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I didn't slow down. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. The factory floor was half empty, the way it always got around quitting time. A few younger guys glanced up as I passed, their faces tightening when they saw the envelope in my hand. They knew. Word spreads fast in a place like this. I reached my bench, scarred, battered, the wood darkened by years of hands and dust and oil. My tools were laid out just the way I liked them. Chisels lined up by size, carving knives freshly sharpened, soft cloth tucked under the edge for polishing. I stood there for a minute, just looking. This wasn't just a job. This was who I was. Every violin I touched carried a piece of me out into the world. I started packing. No rush, no drama. Just slow, deliberate motions, putting my life into a battered cardboard box. One of the apprentices, Jonah, good kid, maybe 22, drifted over. His face was red, his hands twitching like he wanted to say something. Caleb, I'm so sorry, man. I gave him a tight smile. Ain't your fault, son. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. Finally, he just nodded and walked away, head down. I loaded the last of my tools into the box, hefted it against my hip, and walked out without looking back. Not once. Outside, the sun was setting behind the Smoky Mountains, streaking the sky in bruised purples and golds. It should have been beautiful, but all I felt was hollow. I set the box down on the tailgate of my old truck and stood there for a long minute, breathing the cold mountain air deep into my lungs. They thought they were getting rid of a salary. They didn't realize they were throwing away everything that made their instruments worth a damn. And somehow, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not even close. The workbench looked smaller when I came back the next day. Or maybe I was just seeing it for what it was now, a battered stretch of wood in a place that didn't want me anymore. I didn't take much with me the first time, just the essentials. Now, standing there in the morning quiet, I realized the little things still scattered around. A broken peg I'd meant to fix. A piece of ebony waiting to be carved into a fingerboard. An old coffee mug with a chip on the rim that said, "World's okayest dad." A joke gift from one of the apprentices years ago. I packed it all into a second box, working slow, methodical, like it mattered. Even though it didn't. Not to them. Behind me, I heard someone clear their throat. When I turned, it was Tim and Jonah, two of the younger guys I'd mentored over the years. They looked uncomfortable, hands stuffed into their pockets, eyes darting everywhere, but at me. We heard what happened, Tim said, voice low. Jonah nodded, his face red. It's not right, Caleb. Everybody knows it. I shrugged. It's done. But we're all pissed, Tim said, stepping closer. You built this place. Harmonia wouldn't even have half its clients without you. They're fools. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I just closed the box and lifted it under my arm. As I walked toward the door, I heard Jonah call after me, voice cracking a little. We'll find you, man. Wherever you end up next. I paused, turned my head slightly, and gave him a small nod. That meant more to me than they probably realized. Outside, the cold air hit me hard. The box felt heavier somehow, like it was carrying more than wood and tools. Memories, maybe. Pride. Loss. I loaded it into the truck beside yesterday's box and stood there for a minute, staring at the factory building. Gray, squat, ugly. It hadn't changed, but I had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a flood of messages. Margot, come home. The coffee's hot. Jonah, they're idiots. Let us know if you need anything. Louisa, another apprentice. This place won't survive without you. Bet. Even a few from old clients. Word must have traveled fast. I didn't answer any of them yet. I just got in the truck, cranked the engine, and pulled out without a second glance at the place that tossed me aside like scrap wood. The drive home was quiet. Just the hum of the tires and the occasional crow watching from a fence post. Out here, in the hills, you could forget the rest of the world even existed. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, Margot was already waiting on the porch, wrapped in her big flannel coat. Her hair was tucked up messy under a beanie, and her hands cradled a steaming mug. She smiled at me, soft, understanding, and I swear that smile alone could have held me together if I was falling apart. I climbed out of the truck, stretched, and leaned against the side for a second. Well? She asked, voice light but careful. I shook my head. It's over. She nodded, like she already knew. We didn't talk much at first. We just sat side by side on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the fields roll out toward the mountains. After a while, she said, You're not done, Caleb. Not really. I smiled a little, more out of habit than anything else. I'm 54, Mark. Not exactly a spring chicken. She bumped her shoulder against mine. You've got more skill in your pinky finger than most of those corporate suits have in their whole bodies. And you know it. I let out a long breath, watching it mist in the cold air. Deep down, I did know it. Harmonia's reputation was built on the techniques I taught them, the tricks no textbook could capture. The feel of a wood grain that would sing if you carved it just right. The patience to let a soundboard dry an extra 6 months, even if it meant missing a deadline. You can't teach that in an online training course. You either have it, or you don't. And those assembly line workers they hired? No amount of lean manufacturing seminars was going to save them from bad craftsmanship. I set my coffee down and pulled a small leather notebook from my coat pocket, one I hadn't touched in years. The first few pages were filled with scribbles from a different time, ideas for a dream I'd never had the guts to chase. Slowly, with a pencil I found stuck behind my ear, I started sketching. A new kind of workshop. Smaller, slower, better. Not just making violins, teaching how to make them. Passing it on the right way. Margot leaned over, peeking at the page. A slow smile spread across her face. I like that one, she said, tapping her finger against a rough drawing of a simple sign. Miles Ludier Studios. I stared at it for a long moment. A tiny ember in my chest flickered to life. Maybe this was it. Not an ending. A beginning. It only took 3 days before the call started. The first one came early in the morning, while I was still on the porch with my coffee. The screen on my old flip phone lit up with a number I recognized too well, Harmonia's main office. I let it ring. They didn't leave a voicemail. An hour later, the same number again. Then later, another call, this time from a number I didn't recognize but could guess. HR, maybe. Or Nicholas himself, trying to put on that syrupy, let's work something out tone. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went down to the shed where I kept my extra wood supplies and started sorting through what was salvageable. Quarter-sawn spruce, some flamed maple, a few ebony blanks I'd been saving for someday. It felt good. Solid. Real. Every rough board in my hands was something that could be made right, if you just took the time. By the end of the day, I had a stack of wood ready for planing, and my phone buzzing like a hive of angry wasps in my coat pocket. When I finally checked, there were 7 missed calls and 4 voicemails. I played the first one on speaker while I sharpened my chisels. Nicholas's voice poured out, still trying for polite. Caleb, hope you're well. Just wanted to check in. We're running into a few, unexpected production issues with the new hires. If you have a minute, we'd love to consult with you. Of course, we'll compensate you handsomely for your time. Please call me back. Soon. I smiled without meaning to. Production issues. I could just imagine it. Greenwood splitting because they didn't know how to season it. Necks warping because they rushed the gluing. Violins coming off the line looking like toys you'd find at a flea market instead of instruments for real musicians. Good. They deserved every mess they were stepping into. The second voicemail was more desperate. Caleb, hi, this is Margaret from HR. Nicholas asked me to reach out. We, have several major clients complaining about product quality, and we're facing potential breach of contract issues. If you're willing to assist, even short-term, there's significant consulting money available. Please call back at your earliest convenience. I set the chisel down and wiped my hands. Consulting money. Now they were pulling out the big guns. The third voicemail was from Jonah. Hey, Caleb. Just a heads up. Things are getting bad. Like, real bad. Assembly guys can't keep up. Half the orders are getting rejected. Harmony is talking about calling in outside help, but nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Thought you should know. I leaned back against the workbench, staring out the shed's cracked window at the hills rolling off in the distance. I thought about the first violin I ever built at Harmonia back when we still signed our names in ink inside the body cavity, so whoever played it 50 years later would know who shaped it. That was what mattered. Not titles. Not suits. Not scaling or profits. Music. Art. Something real that lived after you. They didn't get that. And now they were paying for it. The fourth voicemail was from Nicholas again, his voice tight and rushed. Caleb, please call me back. We're willing to offer a senior consulting package. Very generous. You name your price. I stood there for a long moment, holding the phone in my hand. Name your price. Funny how that worked. When they thought you were disposable, you were worth nothing. When they realized they couldn't replace you, suddenly you were priceless. I flipped the phone shut without replying. I wasn't going back. Not for any amount. Instead, I walked back to the house, where Margot was sitting on the porch with her laptop, sipping tea. She looked up when she heard my boots crunch the gravel. They finally begging? She asked with a small smirk. I grinned, setting the phone down on the railing. They can beg all they want. She smiled wider. Good. We sat there a while in easy silence, the late afternoon sun warm on our faces. In the distance, I could hear the faint sounds of songbirds starting up as the day softened into evening. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt at peace. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done. I wasn't Harmonia's lifeboat. I wasn't their backup plan. I was a man who knew his craft, knew his worth, and knew when it was time to let a sinking ship go down without trying to save the fools who steered it straight into the rocks. Let them drown. I was already building something better. About a week after I stopped answering Harmonia's desperate calls, something unexpected happened. Something that, if I'm being honest, I didn't even realize I was still hoping for. It was a Saturday morning. Gray skies. Light drizzle tapping against the windows. Margot was off at the farmer's market, and I was in the shed again, smoothing a maple backplate with a hand plane so old it used to belong to my grandfather. The smell of fresh wood curled through the air, clean and sharp. I was thinking about maybe starting a small line of violins, not mass production, nothing like that. Just a few, done the right way, with care. That's when my phone rang again. But this time, the number wasn't one I recognized. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Caleb Miles, I said, brushing sawdust off my jeans. There was a small pause on the other end. Then a woman's voice, clear and direct. Mr. Miles, my name is Helena Ward. I'm the founder of Windmere Studios. The name tugged at something in the back of my mind. Windmere? I'd heard whispers. A boutique shop out west, just starting to make a name for itself. Musicians talked about them like a secret past between friends, the kind of place where real craftsmanship still mattered. I know this is out of the blue, Helena continued, but I was wondering if you might be open to a conversation. I hesitated, phone pressed tight against my ear. A conversation about what? I asked carefully. She laughed, not a corporate laugh, not the polished, fake kind, a real one. Light, a little self-deprecating. About building something better, she said. Something the right way. That got my attention. We set up a meeting for the next afternoon, halfway between Boone and Asheville, at a small cafe tucked off the highway. Nothing fancy. Wooden tables. Good pie. The kind of place where you didn't need to wear a tie to be taken seriously. Helena Ward was in her early 40s, with short dark hair and a no-nonsense way of carrying herself. She wore jeans and boots, not heels, and when she shook my hand, it was firm and warm, like she meant it. Mr. Miles, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I've been following your work for years. That caught me off guard. People at Harmonia barely knew my first name half the time. I heard about what happened, she continued, picking up her coffee mug. Your reputation speaks for itself. You don't need Harmonia. Honestly, they never deserved you. I leaned back a little, studying her. And what is it you're offering, exactly? I asked. Helena smiled, small and sure. A chance to do it right. Head of design at Windmere Studios. Full creative control. No assembly lines. No compromises. I didn't say anything at first. I just let her words settle into the cracks inside me where the old bitterness still lived. You'd be training a team, she went on. Young artisans who want to learn the craft, not just punch a clock. You'd have full say over materials, production timelines, everything. We're not chasing mass markets. We're chasing excellence. I stared at my coffee for a long moment. This was the kind of offer you dream about, if you're lucky enough to get one at all. Helena must have seen the hesitation on my face because she leaned forward, her voice softer. I know you've been burned, Caleb. I get it. But I'm not asking you to fix someone else's mess. I'm asking you to help build something that honors what you believe in. I looked up at her then, really looked. And what I saw wasn't a corporate ladder climber. It wasn't a Nicholas Rayburn in a nicer package. It was someone who understood. Someone who knew that real craftsmanship isn't efficient or cheap or scalable. It's slow. It's stubborn. It's full of soul. And it's worth it. I took a breath, the first easy one in a long time. All right, I said, setting my mug down. Let's build it. Helena grinned wide, reaching across the table to shake my hand again. Welcome to Windmere, she said. The deal was simple. No fancy contracts, no 10 rounds of negotiation. A straightforward offer. A straightforward man. She promised me respect, freedom, patience. And for the first time since that awful day in Harmonia's conference room, I felt the ember inside me flare back to life. Real, strong, stubborn. This wasn't a second chance. It was a better chance. And I wasn't about to waste it. It had been about a month since I shook Helena Ward's hand in that little cafe and said yes to Windmere Studios. And for the first time in years, I woke up wanting to go to work. Every morning, I drove an hour to the new workshop, a big, airy place filled with the smell of fresh lumber and linseed oil. Instead of fluorescent lights and gray cubicles, there were big windows, long benches, and real tools hanging neatly on the walls. And instead of clock punchers, there were people who actually cared about getting it right. I didn't think much about Harmonia anymore. Or at least, I tried not to. But betrayal has a way of lingering, like a splinter you can't quite dig out. I didn't realize how deep the rot went until Theo called. Theo Davis had been one of Harmonia's best finishers. Quiet guy. Steady hands. We'd worked side by side for nearly a decade before Nicholas shoved him into some meaningless quality control desk job. I hadn't heard from him since I left. Until one Saturday afternoon, when his number popped up on my phone. I almost didn't answer. But something told me I should. Caleb. His voice was tight, like he wasn't sure if he should be making this call at all. Hey, Theo. Been a while. There was a pause. I need to show you something. We met at a greasy diner off Highway 70. Neutral ground. Theo looked rough, thinner, pale, like he hadn't slept in a week. He slid into the booth across from me without meeting my eyes. He pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the table between us. What's that? I asked. He licked his lips, glanced around the empty diner, and pushed it toward me. Proof. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were copies of emails, spreadsheets, and meeting notes, all with Nicholas Rayburn's name on them, all outlining a plan, months in the making, to systematically get rid of every high-salaried craftsman at Harmonia. Phase 1. Replace senior luthiers with assembly line workers. Phase 2. Slash production costs by 30%. Phase 3. Sell the company to a private equity group before the dip in quality hit public reputation. It was all there. Black and white. Cold and calculated. I flipped through page after page, my hands getting tighter with each one. This wasn't just about saving money. It wasn't incompetence. It was sabotage. Planned. Deliberate. I wasn't laid off because of bad luck or bad timing. I was targeted. Theo watched me read, his face drawn. I found it by accident, he said quietly. They left a shared folder open during a meeting. I copied everything. I set the papers down carefully, like they were something filthy I didn't want to touch. They never intended to keep anyone who actually knew what they were doing, I said, my voice low. Theo nodded. It was all about the sale. And now? I asked. Theo gave a bitter smile. Now the buyers pulled out. Word got around about the defective instruments. Lawsuits are piling up. Last I heard, Harmonia is bleeding money so fast they're begging for a bailout. I leaned back against the cracked vinyl seat, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. I should have felt angry. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying the weight of other people's stupidity. Tired of pretending like any of it surprised me. You gonna do anything with this? Theo asked, tapping the envelope. I thought about it for a long minute. I could leak it, take them down publicly, destroy what little was left of Harmonia's reputation. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't need my help to crash and burn. They were already doing a fine job of that all by themselves. Nah, I said finally. Let him rot. Theo gave a short, humorless laugh. I figured you'd say that. We sat there for a while, sipping bad coffee in the flickering neon light. When we finally stood to leave, Theo hesitated. For what it's worth, Caleb, you were the real deal. Always were. I clapped him on the shoulder. So were you. Then I walked out into the chilly evening air, the manila envelope tucked under my arm, and let the door swing shut behind me. As I drove home, I thought about the years I gave to Harmonia. The passion, the pride, the countless hours spent perfecting something that none of those suits would ever understand. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it didn't define me. Not anymore. I had something better now. And I wasn't looking back. The first real day at Windmere Studios didn't feel like starting a new job. It felt like breathing after years underwater. Helena met me at the front entrance, her sleeves rolled up, already helping the new apprentices set up benches and organize tools. This is your space now, too, she said with a grin, tossing me a set of brass keys. Make it yours. The workshop was wide open, the walls lined with tall windows that let in soft mountain light. The floor still smelled like fresh varnish, and every bench gleamed under the morning sun. There were no cubicles, no clock-in stations, no managers pacing the floor with clipboards. Just wood, tools, and eager hands waiting to learn. At first, I didn't know where to start. When you've spent decades working under someone else's rules, it takes a minute to remember you're allowed to make your own. But slowly, step by step, I figured it out. I started by setting up a full documentation system, the kind I had begged Harmonia to let me build for years. Not just process manuals, but real teaching guides, handwritten notes on how to pick wood that would age well, how to carve scrolls that looked alive, how to tune the body of a violin by ear. Every morning, the apprentices would gather around my bench with notebooks and worn pencils. Some of them barely knew how to hold a chisel properly, but they had something better than skill. They had hunger, respect, patience. We started small, one violin at a time. It took almost 6 weeks to finish the first one. When it was done, after endless hours of shaping, sanding, tuning, we set it on a clean cloth under the big window. Helena came over, wiping her hands on her jeans, and stood with me in the quiet. The violin gleamed in the sunlight. Not perfect, but close. I picked it up carefully, tucked it under my chin, and drew the bow across the strings. The first note filled the room, clear, rich, full of a kind of warmth you couldn't fake. The apprentices froze, wide-eyed. Helena smiled, slow and proud. It was beautiful. Not because it was fancy. Not because it was fast. But because it was right. Word started spreading faster than we could keep up. First, it was a local string quartet. Then a soloist from Asheville. Then one of the big symphonies in Charlotte called. They didn't want mass production. They didn't want cheap. They wanted something real. Within 3 months, our tiny operation had more orders than we could fill. Collectors, concertmasters, music teachers, they all came knocking. Not because of flashy marketing or slick advertising. Because when they held a Windmere violin, they felt the difference. Helena didn't rush us. She didn't push quotas or talk about scaling up. Every time we finished an instrument, she'd just nod and say, "Good work. Now do it again." The apprentices started getting better, faster than I expected. By late fall, some of them were finishing their own scroll carvings, their own purfling inlays. They still had a long way to go, but you could see it, that spark, that pride. It wasn't just about making instruments anymore. It was about making craftsmen, real ones. The kind who understood that good work takes time. That patience isn't a weakness, it's the whole point. Late one evening, after the apprentices had gone home and the sun dipped low behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, Helena found me still at my bench, sketching designs for a new viola line. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a little smile playing on her lips. "You look happy," she said. I wiped the pencil dust off my hands and shrugged. "I feel steady," I said after a moment. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. "You're building more than instruments here, Caleb. You're building something that'll outlast both of us." I looked around the workshop, the benches, the shavings curled on the floor, the smell of spruce hanging in the air. And for the first time, I believed her. This wasn't just a job. This was a legacy. A place where the right way still mattered. Where quality beat quantity every time. Where craftsmanship wasn't some forgotten word in an old dictionary. It lived here. It thrived here. And so did I. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. I was in the workshop, helping one of the apprentices glue the backplate onto a violin, when Helena poked her head into the room, holding her phone up like she couldn't believe what she was reading. "You're gonna want to see this," she said, voice half amused, half stunned. I wiped my hands on a cloth and crossed over. The headline on her screen was bold and sharp. Harmonia Instruments files for bankruptcy amid quality scandals and lawsuits. I stared at it for a long second, letting the words sink in. Bankruptcy. I shouldn't have been surprised. The signs had been there for months, clients fleeing, instruments falling apart, vendors cutting ties. But seeing it in black and white still hit different. They're finished, Helena said, shaking her head. I handed the phone back without saying anything. Just went back to the workbench, steady and quiet, like nothing had happened. Inside, though, something shifted. Not gloating. Not revenge. Just closure. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't satisfaction. It was a kind of peace. The same kind you feel when a storm finally passes and you step outside and realize the world's still standing and so are you. By lunchtime, the news was everywhere. Articles detailing how Harmonia's cost-cutting measures led to dozens of defective instruments. Interviews with furious musicians who paid five-figure sums for violins that fell apart after a few months. Stories about breached contracts, ruined reputations, and investors fleeing like rats off a sinking ship. Nicholas Rayburn's name came up more than once. Not flattering mentions. One article said he had resigned to pursue other opportunities, which was corporate speak for he got tossed out before the shareholders could burn him alive. Good riddance. I didn't need to hear the details. I already knew how it would go. Lawsuits would drain whatever money was left. The building would sit empty, dusty, and abandoned. The Harmonia name, once respected, once proud, would become a warning, a lesson whispered in boardrooms and music schools. Don't sacrifice craftsmanship for a quick buck, or you'll end up like them. I finished helping the apprentice with the gluing, making sure the clamps were set just right. Then I took my coffee out to the porch behind the workshop, where the mountains rolled out under a wide, endless sky. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. I let it buzz 3 times before I finally fished it out. Sure enough, Nicholas Rayburn. I stared at the screen for a moment, thumb hovering over the decline button. Some small, dark part of me wanted to answer. Wanted to hear whatever desperate offer he was about to throw out. Consulting. Interim CEO. Savior of the day. But I didn't. I just watched the call ring out, slow and inevitable, like a dying breath. When it stopped, I deleted the missed call without a second thought. Nicholas was calling because he still hadn't learned the most important rule. When you betray the people who actually build the thing you're trying to sell, you end up with nothing worth saving. And you end up alone. Behind me, inside the workshop, I could hear the apprentices laughing over lunch. I could smell the faint scent of spruce and varnish drifting through the air. Life was moving forward. I wasn't wasting one more minute looking backward. Nicholas could shout into the void all he wanted. Harmonia could crumble into dust. I was already somewhere better, a place built on patience, pride, and skill. A place where what mattered most wasn't the bottom line, or efficiency, or quarterly reports. It was the work. Always the work. And finally, I was exactly where I belonged. By early spring, Windmere Studios wasn't just a workshop anymore. It was something bigger. Something that felt alive. Orders kept coming in from orchestras, collectors, soloists, people who had gotten tired of mass-produced junk and were looking for something real again. But even more important than the orders were the letters. Emails from young musicians, craft students, even old-school woodworkers. All asking the same thing. Will you teach me? At first, Helena and I weren't sure what to do. Windmere was already growing faster than we expected. Starting an academy seemed like a crazy idea. But every night, when I sat on the porch with Margot and talked it over, I kept coming back to the same thought. If we didn't teach it, who would? If we didn't pass down the real skills, the patience, the craftsmanship, the stubborn pride, it would die out. Just like it almost did at Harmonia. So we did it. We founded the Windmere Craftsmanship Academy. Not a fancy college. Not a slick program with brochures and commercials. Just a simple promise. Come here, and you'll learn how to make something that matters. Helena may be the head of the academy without blinking. You're already doing the job, she said, handing me the official paperwork with a grin. Might as well make it official. We held an open house on the first Saturday in May. Sunlight poured through the workshop windows. The smell of fresh varnish and sawdust filled the air. Tables were set up with simple displays, violin bodies in various stages of carving, hand planes laid out neatly, scraps of maple and spruce to run your fingers across. People came from everywhere. Students from the city. Retired teachers who always dreamed of building something with their hands. Parents with teenagers who didn't fit the college mold but knew they were meant to create. And among them, standing a little awkwardly near the door, were some faces I hadn't seen in a while. Former Harmonia apprentices. Jonah. Louisa. Even Theo. They'd heard about Windmere. Heard about the academy. And now, here they were, eyes full of hope and maybe a little fear, wondering if there was still a place for them. I walked over, slow and easy. Jonah was the first to speak, rubbing the back of his neck. Hey, Caleb. We heard you might be, taking students. Louisa chimed in quickly. We want to learn. For real this time. Not just, assembly line stuff. Theo just nodded, his face a little flushed. I looked at them, these kids I had once tried to protect in a place that didn't deserve them. And I smiled. Well, I said, crossing my arms, if you're ready to work hard, we've got room. The relief that crossed their faces nearly broke me. We spent the afternoon walking the new students through the workshop, showing them the tools, the wood racks, the sample builds. I laid it out clear, no sugarcoating. It's slow, I said. It's frustrating. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna want to quit. I picked up a piece of raw spruce and held it out. But if you stick with it, if you respect the work, you'll make something that outlives you. Something you can be proud of. They listened like it was gospel. That night, after the last family left and the last of the coffee had gone cold, I stood alone in the middle of the workshop. The windows were dark now. The tools were silent. But the place was full of something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or just the quiet satisfaction of a man finally standing where he was always meant to be. Margot came in, still in her gardening boots, and leaned against the doorframe. How's it feel, Professor Miles? She teased, grinning. I chuckled, shaking my head. Feels good, I said simply. She walked over and slipped her hand into mine. We stood there for a long time, just listening to the night sounds, the crickets, the software of the ceiling fans, the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. Tomorrow would be the first day of real classes. Tomorrow, the workshop would fill with the sound of chisels tapping, hand planes rasping, strings singing. Tomorrow, the next generation would start carving their mark on the world. And I'd be right there, teaching them how to do it right. No shortcuts. No assembly lines. No selling out. Just work worth doing. And lives worth living. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just building instruments. I was building a legacy. One careful cut at a time.